Hello and welcome to the Right on Crime podcast series featuring experts from our Correctional Leadership Network. I'm your host, Scott Peyton, former law enforcement, probation and parole officer, and correctional director at Right on Crime. The United States incarcerates more people than any other nation in the world. And for decades, Louisiana was notoriously known as the prison capital of the world, warehousing more prisoners per capita than any other state and even in many other nations. This year, Louisiana fell second to Mississippi after implementing groundbreaking criminal justice reforms in 2017. To give us some insight into what's changing in Louisiana, I'd like to welcome Louisiana Department of Corrections Secretary James LeBlanc. Thank you, Secretary LeBlanc, for joining us at Right on Crime. Let me briefly share some highlights from your decades-long career in corrections, and then we'll get started with our podcast. Secretary LeBlanc has over 40 years with the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections. He served in the U.S. Army in Vietnam. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration from Southeastern Louisiana University, and he has served under both the Jindal and the John Bell Edwards administrations. And one of the points I like, Mr. Secretary, from your bio is that you stress the department's focus is on public safety, but you also mention your passion for reentry. And that's definitely a passion I share with you and a passion that I've seen as we've worked together while I was with probation and parole and certainly in my role with Right on Crime. Well, let's get right to it. Let's talk about the challenges that we face here in Louisiana. In 2017, Louisiana passed sweeping criminal justice reform. The Department of Corrections was very active and involved in the passage of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative. What are your thoughts about the 2017 reforms? What's working? What's not? What can we do better?
Well, first of all, thank you, Scott, and thank Right on Crime. And I think Louisiana's fortunate to have a Louisiana person in your position. And I want to personally thank you for everything you've done in helping move this reform efforts forward, because you've been personally involved at the Capitol, seen you there many a times. And even when we weren't in committee, you were in committee. And I just have to tell you personally how much I appreciate that. And your professionalism, both from a criminal justice standpoint and a personal standpoint. I appreciate that. And I guess we're a little unfortunate that we still don't have you in our department, but I think you're probably doing a little bit more good out there doing what you're doing, and I appreciate that so much.
Thank you.
We 2017 was a good year for us in the reform efforts, and I of course, the governor and the legislature on both sides of the aisle were a very big part in us getting these reform efforts. And we had a lot of data, a lot of statistics, a lot of work went in the year before. I chaired that reform committee. We had legislators, judges. I don't think you were on that committee at the time, but we did a lot in that year to get prepared for those 10 pieces of legislation that were presented. Our focus on that reform efforts was one, making sure the right people are in prison, more serious violent offenders versus nonviolent with drug problems, trying to separate that group a little bit and let's get more towards treatment on that front end versus dealing with people that need to be dealt with in the prison system. And, just a real quick example is our percentage of population today is that we've reduced our nonviolent offenders from 45% to 35% in our prison population. And our violent offender percentage has gone up from somewhere around 50 to 65%. So that's an indication that's working. And of course, the second thing is strengthening our community corrections. That's so important. As you know, our probation parole division is a key component of anything that we do in our reform efforts. And as warden, I spent a year as interim director when my predecessor asked me to go in. until we found somebody that had the type of experience that we needed to move into that position. But I learned then that there was a big drop off from prison to our community corrections. And when I went back as warden after that year, Secretary Stahl, my predecessor, asked me to pilot reentry for our department. And I learned then, I began that process, and I saw the results of that and developing that communications with probation and parole, getting that information that they needed to our parole agents so they could do the things that they needed to do in order to supervise. And from that, I guess I brought that to this position, and that in itself has been a big step in the right direction. Just give an example, our probation and parole population has gone from right at 71,000 to 45, 46,000. Caseloads are down from right at 150 to 89. So again, that second bullet for our mission and goal in our reform efforts seems to be working in the right direction. It had a lot to do with less revocations. We earn compliance credits is making a difference, where if you do the right things on probation and parole, you can get some time off and get out a little early, so that's working. Third thing, and I think this is important, is the reinvestment side and dropping the barriers to reentry. Both of those, that's two things there that work together. Because our reinvestment part, and we somewhere around $115 million that we have reinvested into our four major areas, which is DOC efforts, which is probation and parole, our prisons, where for our education, vocational programs, for our community corrections, for our grants that we now establish in that working relationship with our community partners, which is so important. And of course, crime victims. I mean, you have to keep crime victims involved in this. And we've been able to reimburse the Crime Victims Reparation Fund, working on 3 years backlog that we've been able to reimburse in that investment. And then the fourth, which came on the second year, is Office of Juvenile Justice. And I think anybody from Louisiana knows that the issues with our OJJ section right now, and dealing with a lot of different areas there. And they were able to use, I think it's somewhere around 5 or 6 million that we've invested in OJJ for diversion programs. So that part of it is working. Our reentry efforts, I can't say enough about that, and the investment side of that, and DOC, expanding our education and vocational programs, doing the little things in probation and parole with emergency transition housing, the little things with bus tokens, all those little things that make a difference, IDs, Social Security cards, all the things that you have to have in order to get a job on your way out. So, our reform efforts are working. I think the other thing I need to say is that CJI is coming in to do a deep evaluation. And I would refer anybody listening to the podcast. We have 2 annual reports that have been done. Our third one on 21 will be coming out here in the next couple of weeks. But there's a lot of detailed information in those annual reports. And the other is, in the next probably 2 or 3 weeks, we met with the governor's office this week. Our oversight council we're going to activate it again. So we'll be meeting in the next 2 or 3 weeks to begin that oversight review and sharing information with the council, so to help them understand where we are, and of course get input back from them on things that they think maybe we could be doing something different or better or in addition to. So we're looking forward to that. I think that'll be more public oriented, where the public will get a better understanding. And so how important that is the communication side of this. So I think we're doing pretty good. I guess some of this will tell. We have our internal audit that's going on right now with the funding side of things and justice reinvestment. And then we'll have a program audit by the legislative auditors that's coming in. In fact, I think we meet with them this week to look at that. And we're real comfortable that we're doing a lot of good things and doing the right things with the funding that we've got and reinvested so far. So we're excited about it and excited about where we are.
Sounds great. And you're correct. I was not in those initial committee meetings for the 2017 reforms. I was actually in the trenches in Ville Platte with probation and parole. So
So that was okay.
I got to feel it when it happened, and you pointed out that you were director for probation and parole for a little over a year. I didn't realize that until just recently reviewing your biography again, preparing for this podcast. And I think that's important because I know my function as a probation and parole officer changed when I started working at Hunt to do overtime to help out with the staff shortage and to allow visitation. And I learned two critical things then is that the importance of visitation. There's nothing like seeing the smile on the men's face that are there incarcerated as they walk the big plate of food, with grandma, with mom, with their children, and just the happiness that was in that room. Everything else was left behind, and for that short period of time, the guys that were incarcerated at Hunt were able to enjoy themselves and to reunite with family members, and really crushing to watch it end as well. The tears and just kind of that letdown after seeing the family. But I realized, it's so important the role that probation and parole plays in preventing and keeping people from returning back to prison, or in the case of probation, going to prison. So I think it has to be very valuable for you spending that time as director for probation and parole to understand and see the challenges that are faced as well. There's a lot of barriers for probation and parole officers, and you mentioned the 150 caseload. When I left 4 years ago, it was right about 145. So you just put out fires, and it's very difficult to do an effective job. So as we see those caseloads drop, I think we're going to see much better results, and just from the fact that there's fewer people to work with, and those agents can concentrate on those that pose a greater risk to public safety. Moving into the prison area, what about good time credits? Many say that good time credits are necessary tool for corrections. What is your opinion, your thoughts on how good time credits help one, the officers that are doing the work every day inside the prisons, and those that are incarcerated, to encourage them to participate in programming and just general improvement?
Yeah, of course, in Louisiana, we have two types of good time. We have the statutory good time, which is that you earn that while you're in prison. Then we have program good time, which you can earn additional good time for participating in programs. And the statutory good time is look, we need every tool in the box, to use to manage. And this is a big help for us in managing the population, because if they don't do what they're supposed to be doing, don't just from a disciplinary standpoint, do the things that they're supposed to be doing, that good time can be taken away from them on the statutory side. So it's a tool, and it's a very important tool to us. The program side is encouraging them to participate in programs. And some people might say, well, they ought to be doing it for the right reasons, then not necessarily have to get time off. But it's a good encouragement, and we think it's working, and it is helping. And some people don't earn the statutory. I want to point that out. Sex offenders, habitual offenders, second offender, violent offenders don't earn good time. So they don't get any time off on their time served. And I want to point that out. There's the other side of the coin a little bit, Scott, in that what we looked at, just to give you an example, last year in 21, we discharged somewhere around 12 to 13,000 people out of our prison system. 8,000 of those people spent less than 8 months with us. 8,000 spent less than 8 months. So that group is a group that I am focusing on right now. I don't have a lot of answers at this point. I'm working on answers because it drives me to another focus of a mission of ours, is that's a group probably, even though they might be a nonviolent group, but it's a group we probably need to be getting to, that we probably are missing to some extent. We have reentry centers. I didn't mention that, but we now have established 10 reentry centers throughout our state to help with the local level. That's one of our big challenges, is housing at the local level, and so that's been a challenge of mine. In that, when they get sentenced, they get credit for time served, and they earn good time for credit for time served. And then by the time they spend any time with us, they're ready to go, And so I'm working on that with Red Covington, our assistant secretary, and Thomas Bickham, my undersecretary, and how we can manage the funding and try to do a better job of maybe an additional per diem to work on getting some of our bigger local facilities more like a state prison. I'll put it very simply. Let's move them up at another level where they can provide, because that's where a lot of them are discharging from that we aren't able to get to. So from a good time standpoint, that part of it might work a little bit against us, but overall, we need good time. We have to have good time in our system to manage. It's real important, and it's a key for that correctional officer working on the front line to help them. And we struggle right now with recruitment and retention, and so that we need everything we can get to help those guys out at the front line of our prison system.
That's a great point. And with COVID and with the backlogs in the court system, we're going to see a lot more people spending more time in parish jails pre-trial. And a lot of people do forget that you do get credit for time served. And then by the time they process and move through, you're looking at someone that's ready to discharge that may or may not have received any substantial programming or what you would have gotten if you would have made it to, say, Hunt or any other state facility. So looking forward to see how that works out. I mean, that is
And let me add a little bit to that. What we're looking at, Scott, on that is that maybe a few of these reentry centers could be reception centers, where once they get sentenced, they got to go to that reception center, be evaluated, and determine where they need to go to get something before they discharge. So we're looking at more reception centers at the local level versus reentry centers. So that's one of the ways that we're looking at. Again, this is early on, and we don't have a lot of definite answers yet, but we're definitely looking at that and how we can get to that group that's discharging quickly on us.
I think another point too on those that are discharged on good time parole supervision. A lot of people don't realize that they're going to be supervised through probation and parole until that end date. So if they were given 4 years sentence and only spent a year or so in DOC, they're going to be supervised for that remainder by a parole officer. But it is important to get that critical programming.
No question. That's a great point, Scott. And discharging out of these local jails makes our PMP staff job so much more difficult. It does. And hopefully, and I know the reentry centers are easing that up to some extent to be able to get to the ones at the local level to help our PMP agents get better prepared people when they get to them. So it is helping. It's not complete yet, but we'll get there. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint by any means.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, this situation didn't happen overnight, and it's something that you've been dealing with over 2 administrations with trying to move Louisiana forward. And it's not just getting rid of the prison population, it's preventing and reducing recidivism to make sure that we control that front door and who's coming in as opposed to opening the back door and letting everyone out, because that's not what's happening.
No,
that was not the intent of the reform. So in your experience, and you mentioned earlier, we have crossed paths throughout the years at the Capitol, in committee hearings and as critical legislation, good and bad, is introduced each year. In your experience, when lawmakers are discussing criminal justice policy, is the conversation properly informed by correctional expertise in comparison with the prosecutors, judges, and other stakeholders? Almost every criminal justice bill that comes out, we're going to get an opinion from the District Attorneys Association. Sometimes the judges will speak out, the Sheriff's Association, and then obviously the advocates are weighing in. But what we've seen across the nation and saw last session a little bit, and you pointed that out, is that DOC's not always there at the table during these discussions. If you'd like to shed some light on that, especially, more particular your office and your involvement in that legislative process.
Yeah, that first of all, we have a good working relationship with the committees, the Criminal Justice Committee, judiciaries, with Senator Smith and Senator Fall. Both I think are good partners. On the criminal justice side, we've had some success with the committee there, and I think Joe Marino will be a good chair of that as we move forward. I think he's a good kind of middle of the road guy that understands what we're trying to accomplish. Good communications, I think, is important. I'm always in touch by phone. If they call me, they need something or need information. It's good communications. I think that's important. Our budget committee is important to us. Senate Finance is important to us because of the pay raises, if nothing else, for our correctional officers and our probation and parole officers, which has happened. And that is really helping us move things in the right direction with the recruitment and retention issues we're having on both sides, both probation and parole and our prison system. But there's those that try to bring reform backwards. That worries me. That is one of our challenges in maintaining what we have and continue to move forward in our reform efforts. Some of them will take one incident and say, well, we let them all out, so that's what's going on. That is not what's going on in our communities right now. You can pick up the paper any day. In fact, I picked up the paper today and I saw where 2 17-year-olds were arrested for a murder at one of our Breck Parks here in Baton Rouge. The younger group right now, in my opinion, the younger group is those people haven't seen us. They haven't been to us. Those are the ones that we need to get to. I'm working on that 18 to 24-year-old group to try to, what do we need to do with that group before they leave us? That's another long story that we don't have the time to get into today. But I'm concentrating our efforts on that group. Here in Baton Rouge, we have about 4 or 5 officers that have caseloads of 20 to 25 of that age group that have gun charges and able to concentrate on what's going on with that group, what we can do to get you guys headed in the right direction. So that's important to note. But we've had good relationships with them. I think, I want to say that I think we far enough along with reform that I think we can battle that. I think we have enough foundation, if you will, from what we've done in those areas we talked about in reinvestment, that they can see that, hey, it is improvement. It is getting better. Don't try to blame what's going on in our communities right now. Another thing I would mention, look what happened after Katrina. Look what happened after the 2016 flood, and the crime rates went up. That 2.5 years of COVID has to have a little bit to do with what's going on in our streets right now. I don't think there's any question about that. So don't let COVID, be a reason why we don't go forward with our reform efforts. So good communications with the legislature, keeping them informed. People like yourself, Scott, is helping do that. We just got to stay with it and continue to work on that. I think, with the sheriffs, the judges, and the DAs, Lauren I think he's a great executive director, a man you can work with. We've been able to do that. I'm proud of that. Mike Renat's the same way with the Sheriff's Association. We work closely with them. We have a judges liaison meeting on Friday of this week that we're going to be meeting with them. We do that every 6 months. We meet with the judges, keep them informed, both on specialty courts, drug courts, reentry courts, things we do in there and how we can improve that relationship and getting the kind of information we need for time computation. That's a whole nother story. But But we are working heavily with the legislature, working heavily with the judges, the DAs, law enforcement, the sheriffs, and helping keep them informed. I wasn't able to get to the Sheriff's Association conference this year. I had too much going on. Seth went. We went through a lot with them. I had put together a PowerPoint to make that presentation. Something came up and I couldn't go. But keeping them informed, letting them know what's going on. And they that's a group that you have to work with pretty heavily to keep them headed in the right direction. But I think it's working. So anyway, I think we have a good relationship with the legislature. We just, we just have to continue to do what we're doing. I believe things are going in the right direction. And I think most of them are pretty well informed on our side of the fence anyway.
And that's part of the reason why we started the Correctional Leadership Network here at Right on Crime is to inform the public and stakeholders of what's going on inside the prison walls. I mean, you're going to have to deal, or your department, you personally, have to deal with anything that comes out of the Capitol, the good, the bad policy. It comes to roost right there at the Department of Corrections, and you have to be able to adapt and move forward. A great example is the Safe Alternatives to Segregation Task Force. Started out as legislation, moved over to a commission study. You hosting it, the meetings at DOC, and I'm part of that task force, and I believe we're getting more done sitting with you for hours at a time, and we definitely appreciate your time. We're getting more done in the conference room at DOC headquarters than we could get done in the Capitol with a law or passing legislation. And I think both sides have come to a realization of what goes on each end. And we've had some great feedback and some great conversations. So the work continues outside the Capitol and continues every day, regardless of sessions going on. And definitely appreciate that cooperation because it's everyone. I know the DA
task force, Scott. I really do. That's a good task force, and I appreciate you being on that because it's a good. We got the right people on that task force. Actually, some prior incarcerated people on that task force that have been through it. It's good to hear from them. Very, very, very. I guess neutral on where they are. They're not. It's good information, and we're learning from it. And we've already made some changes in our policies. We've made a lot of changes. That's a whole mental health. Again, another subject that we can talk about all day on mental health. But that's where a lot of our mental health issues end up is in our segregation areas, which is a big deal today. And we're learning a lot from you guys and meeting with y'all and vice versa. I'm sure y'all are learning a lot from us on the end of what goes on in the prison system. So that's a great point. There's a lot going on outside the legislature that people don't realize. That's a good point.
We'll move the next to something you've spoken a lot about is culture change within the department. I can share a quick story because the players in this story have retired and I'm not there either. But in Ville Platte, in the conference room, your picture and the governor's picture are hanging on the wall, and you can see it from the break room. And anytime something bad happened within the department or people were upset with something, the district manager would look at the wall and say, blame the man on the left if it were you, blame the man on the right if it were something coming from the legislature, being the governor. And I'm sure we weren't unique in Ville Platte with the kind of the line staff and headquarters, us versus them type of philosophy going on. That's a hard thing to do. We can pass whatever laws, change whatever policy on the front end, but to get it down to the men and women, and they're great people. I'm in direct communication with many on a regular basis. They want to do what's right. They're not in this job to make a lot of money, but they can definitely make a big difference. How, as secretary, how are you able to help influence and change that culture so that they share your passion for reentry and share your vision, which is public safety, through rehabilitation, through programming, through helping these individuals as they navigate the rest of their lives and trajectory to change what has happened in the past.
Culture change, again, it takes time. It's something that, again, like I said earlier, it's a marathon in the way you do things. I worked my way up through this department, so I've come through the trenches to get where I am today. So I've been through it, and I know how important, and what you reflected, how important our line staff are, our front guys, because without them, there's no program, there's no rehabilitation, there's nothing can happen, and so the old paramilitary style, if you will, of correctional officer and rank and all that in my generation and probably the generation right behind me, it might have worked then, and it probably did, and maybe that's what they needed. But this new generation is totally different, and giving people access to the department and the way it's managed. And I think that's important, and having input. For example, I have an employee advisory group that I meet with, every 6 months. I listen to the front line. It's mandated by policy that each warden has an advisory group. Each district manager has an advisory group to meet with their line staff, to listen to what they have to say, and bring that forward up to the leadership meetings, to our management team meetings. Again, giving input to the guys and making sure they know that they have a say-so in the way this department has managed. Have we had a lot of people retire from some of this? Yes, we have. And probably that was the right thing to do, and that's okay. And I understand that. But I have a great leadership team that's working hard, that's passionate. Like you said, it's not about the money. If it was, we wouldn't be here. And so we have a lot of passionate people in this department that want to do the right thing. And, it's like, and I haven't talked to this probation pro class yet. I'm getting ready to do that. Hopefully I'll do that this week. The academy here, it's the first time they've had one in a while with COVID, but I look forward to just saying, welcome to the department, and helping them understand what we're trying to do, the cultural shift, why we're doing what we're doing. So helping people understand. We developed the diversity, equity, and inclusion section of our department that we have now that we didn't have just a year ago, which actually moved training under that. So we reestablished 9 trainers throughout the department for the prison side. P&P side, as you know, has a good training division, doing the right. You guys have, that's a good division. They don't really need tinkering with training wise, other than a little bit on the reentry side and all that kind of stuff, which has been implemented in their curriculum, which is good. And I'll talk about that when I talk to the guys in the academy. But all that being said is we started at the top with me. I started with me on the training. Everybody on my leadership team, all of the wardens, all the regional managers in probation and pro worked together for a week of training. And that's the way we started this. We're going to start at the top, training everything you need to know about corrections and probation and parole, and why we're doing what we're doing, to keep things simple, and helping people understand why we're doing what we're doing. And that trickles down. The next group was the supervisors at the local level, at our prison system and probation and pro. They're doing that right now as we speak. They're going through that process of training the supervisors to help them understand. And then that goes down. Then after that, the front line will be trained. So I think training is a key to this. In any part of cultural change, people need to understand what you're doing. It's probably taken a little bit longer than I'd like on the training side, but COVID kind of set us back a little bit on being able to get out there. I think it's working. We get input from some of the facilities, the prison facilities, where you do have that reluctance to move in that direction, and we understand that, and so we working on that and how we can change that mindset, because a lot of our officers, especially, again, I'm speaking more on the prison side, is that a lot of our officers promote up and end up not really having a lot of training on how to supervise and do the things you need to do, the soft skills part of this, and treating people like maybe they treated the offender population while they were there. So, that makes a big difference. I'm probably scattering things out a little bit here, but that in itself, I think, is a key component of a cultural shift. And you can't, the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, has a lot more than, the racial issues, all the things that go on in a department that you have to be conscious of. And in our leadership group, and making sure they understand that and get more diversity involved in our department is important. And we understand that, and we are doing that. We're working on that. We have, unfortunately, 78% of our prison population is African American, and we need to understand that. And I certainly understand that. And I'm working heavily on trying to improve what we have in the management side of things. And we have I can't say that enough about the management group in our department. They are passionate about what we're doing. They believe in rehabilitation, but at the same time, we know how important public safety is. We believe what we're doing is improving public safety. I don't think there's any question about that, Scott, at all.
And I think, Mr. Secretary, that's where, when there are differences at the Capitol, I believe all of the advocates that come forward, the DAs, the judges, the sheriffs, they all want public safety. We all want to be able to go to the store at night and not be afraid. We want our crime rates lower. And I think it's all about showing people that this is another tool. Of course, incarceration in some cases is definitely necessary. There are people that belong there in prison, and there's many people that don't, and there's many people that we need to work with so that they don't come back. But it all, when we look at it through the lens of public safety, I think we all want that goal. And getting back to training, it is so. The probation and parole position is so unique, and there's so much going on. I know as an officer, the majority of the training I received was to keep the post certification, to keep the law enforcement side. So it's already a difficult job where you feel like you're more on the law enforcement side. And you have to be. I mean, you have to balance public safety. You're dealing with people that are convicted felons. There is a inherent risk for probation and parole officers, and with the communities that they're walking into, that they always have that opportunity or that chance that they'll need to be in that strictly law enforcement role. But it does create, and it took me 5 years to understand that role. It wasn't until I went to hunt that I really realized that, there are a few instances where I really need to be that law enforcement officer, but I also have to be able to balance that and work on identifying and helping people move through this process of reentry. Now, I can tell you a lot's changed in 5 years since I've been gone. I would have loved to have worked with the cooperation, with the collaborations, with Goodwill Industries, with all the different nonprofits that are doing the things that took up my time, that they would have been better suited to do, as far as employee preparation, those kind of things. I could do a little bit of everything, but they can do it much better. For those that are low risk, let the probation and parole officers handle the law enforcement side, handle the violations, handle those type of things, and supervise those that are high risk. So I love that focus. It's great seeing those caseloads go down. It's great seeing the level of cooperation with DOC and other partners that can help contribute to the mission. We have just a few moments left. I'd like to end with your optimism for the future of the Louisiana Department of Corrections and where you see it going. I'm sure you'll be there another 15, 20 years, but what does the future look like, and how can we help keep the optimism going?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't be sitting here if I wasn't optimistic about where we're going. I think one of the things is, as we have already talked a little bit about, is that I'm optimistic that we have a good foundation in what's going on in our criminal justice system, and we have enough support from different entities to keep this moving in the right direction. Will we have a setback or two? Maybe. but I think that setback's not going to be enough to overcome the movement forward in what we're doing. It's still early. I think as we talked about at the beginning of this, I think the stats are really showing our annual reports. I look forward to the oversight review and council, to working with them and having that activity kind of moving in the right direction. I think that's important. The relationship between our probation and parole division, our community corrections, I say community organizations out there. You just mentioned the Goodwill's Parole Project. I know you were at that event. That was so inspiring. I mean, that's the kind of things that keep me going, and the things that they're doing with that group is just absolutely amazing. But those relationships, but in particular, as we talked about, our prison to community corrections and the relationship that we have on both sides of that now is to me is optimistic. Corrections Leaders Association that I'm a member of nationally, and I would mention that, this is a national movement. This, as you know, and you listen to other directors, and you're involved enough nationally to understand that this is not just about Louisiana. This is about moving corrections reform in a different direction in our prison system in particular, and in our community corrections. So I'm on a reentry committee on that, and I'm looking forward to that. We had our first meeting here in the last 3 weeks, but part of that is what you're doing, Scott, is getting the word out there, getting maybe a scorecard on reentry, the things that need to be done, a playbook, establishing what's best practices, and continuing to move forward in that direction. Of course, we have Louisiana Corrections Association. I don't know if you're attending our conference. I hope you are. To me is something to look forward to. That's a good group that's doing some really good things, and the training part of that is all important. And again, as I said earlier, I think we all understand, and this is not really an optimistic part of this, but we know we need prisons, and we will always need prisons. And we understand that. We're not trying to change that at all. We think if we don't make a change in our prison system, the crime rates and all that would be a hell of a lot worse than they are today if we didn't do what we were doing. So I'm looking forward to it. I don't know about 10 or 15 years, Scott, but I'm gonna be around as long as my health's okay and I'm doing okay. I love what I do. I'm very passionate about what I do, and more importantly, I love the people that I work around. And it's to be able to help people get back on their feet and make a life for themselves. And you make it a good point at the visiting part of this, the families, the reunification. One of the things, and this is a quick note, that, for example, I was making rounds at Hunt last week, and a guy came up to me. He said, "Secretary LeBlanc, let me ask you something." This was an inmate. He said, they have tablets now, and which is good, and we have a few issues there, but it's a good thing because they can do a lot of things on a tablet plus use the phone. He said, "Look," he said, I belong to a religious organization out on the street, and on Sundays I call in, and they let me be a part of that on my tablet." He said, "But every 15 minutes I got to hang up and call back." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." So what that was, we had wall phones, where you had to get off in 15 minutes so somebody else could use the wall phone. I might be getting out of hand. But real quickly, I got back here and I made a change that they can, they're not tying up anybody. Why not let them talk to their family, their kids longer than 15 minutes? Those little things that make a big difference to them. And that parenting, all that's so important because, poverty and education, and we didn't talk about that a lot, but is a big challenge for this state. Is a driver, if they get to that middle school level and they don't have the mentorship that they need, they're going to get mentors they don't need. And that's what's happening out there right now. And we have got to narrow in on that on the front end before they get to us. And again, we're working with OJJ to do that. So I'm optimistic. I really am, and I'll continue to be. And I think we'll see continued improvement in what we're doing and what's happening in our communities with the people that are working out there with these wraparound services and helping us move this forward is important.
Well, I'm definitely excited where things are headed, and thank you again, Secretary LeBlanc, for joining us for the second installment of the Correctional Leadership Network at Right on Crime. For those listening today, follow the links to find out more about these issues and how conservative criminal justice reform can make a difference by visiting our website at rightoncrime.com.